Sorry, guys, we had a little glitch here. I'm not sure how it showed up live, but we got bumped off here, so we're back. Hopefully, it was seamless on your end, but we got bumped off for half a second. But I was saying that we are going to talk about one of the most often overlooked components of how to weaponize and prepare yourself for violence. But let me do this. Let me do this as a setup. One of the most important things I think people understand is that there's three types of crisis that we could ever face in this world. Okay, it doesn't matter. And that is the natural crisis, the mechanical crisis, and then the human crisis. So, real quick, I believe that a great many number of people are obsessed with how they perform in a crisis. And I guess I mean obsessed in the sense that, like, almost every single person has thought about what they would do in the event of a natural crisis, natural disaster. Okay, for some of those, like, I've lived in Edmonton virtually my whole life, other than the times I've traveled for training and lived in the States for a bit as there's training stuff. But I was here for the tornadoes. And many people remember the tornadoes, and if you weren't in Edmonton for the tornado and got to witness, the damage and the chaos that it caused, and the death and the lives that it damaged, you have probably had some exposure to a natural crisis, whether that's just a storm of something. Okay, and those are intense circumstances, and people often think about, okay, what would I do? Am I prepared? How would I handle that type of crisis? So the natural crisis. The second crisis is the mechanical crisis. And again, a lot of people have, if not direct firsthand experience, they have at least secondhand experience, somebody close to them, with some sort of mechanical disaster, meaning what? Like a car accident, meaning an accident at work. There's an explosion, there's a chain breaks, a load drops, something devastating happens where there is a massive threat to human life, whether it's yours or coworkers or people close to you, family, or there's severe injury or in fact even death, and that is the mechanical crisis. And again, people often think, how do I prepare for this? What would I do in this emergency? Matter of fact, almost every place of business has CPR, right? They require that people have valid CPR certificates, or they provide yearly training or maintenance of it. They have PPE. You go into job sites and they want to protect. Why? Because there's experience with both natural and mechanical crisis. And then, of course, the third crisis is the human crisis, meaning what? It's interpersonal human aggression. That's what we're talking about. Violence falls under the human crisis. Now, I did this big breakdown because if you look at the first two, the natural and the mechanical crisis, they are very, very different from the human crisis. There's three different types of crisis, but they are not equal. Right? And why are they not equal? They're not equal because the natural crisis, although it can be devastating, can cause loss of life, it can cause massive destruction, can completely, change your life. Mechanical crisis, the same thing can happen, can cause death, can cause injury, can completely change your life. The third, the human crisis, is different in and of itself, that it's personal. It is another member of our species making a decision, whether that decision was a spontaneous decision or whether it was a premeditated decision, to debase and dehumanize to the point of killing, murdering an innocent person, or injuring or destroying. Okay? So that is a completely different thing. And there's every aspect, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but the idea, again, it's like people, if my house is destroyed by a tornado and I'm injured and put in the hospital and all my belongings are scattered to the four corners of the neighborhood, I will have a different type of outpouring of help. There will be people there to help me. There are people not there to help me rebuild, to collect, to help counsel, all this type of stuff. There was people that will run, in aid of that. It's a different thing. And the same when it comes to mechanical. But the human crisis is very different because people often don't even understand how to relate to you because you've experienced something that they can't even grasp. And again, this goes back to us talking about violence being its own language and how people don't understand the language of violence. They don't want to look at it, the hard realities. Pretty much everything we've talked about in the last 3 or 4 podcasts will explain why the human crisis is so different. And again, this is important because in every single type of crisis, the thing that people have to understand that is often overlooked is how the human system is actually impacted. Prepare for a natural disaster, a natural crisis. People buy all kinds of shit. They stock up on food, they buy ready-to-eat meals, they buy canned goods, they They have they have generators, alternate sources of power, alternate sources of heat. They have I'm going to secondary locations. If something ever happened, I'd leave my house and I'd make my way, and I got a little piece of land out in the country where I'm isolated. I've got hunting skills. I've got all this type of stuff. And so they get, and those things are important, but they spend all their time building skills, acquiring tools and technology and things that they go, this will help mitigate the natural crisis. I'll survive. Mechanical crisis, same thing, right? But the human crisis, something becomes very, very evident. And it applies to all the crises. You can have the best tech, the best techniques, the best, all this shit. You can have the best plans in the world. But if any type of crisis hits you, the human system, if you cannot regulate, if you panic, if you implode, then all of your plans are going to go to shit. You will not be able to. I mean, we've heard how many times in a crisis people can't dial 911. They're dialing 411 or 311, or they can't see. You know what I mean? The human system has failed. People talk for years, I would this. They're preppers, they're planners. And in the moment of a crisis, they say nothing, they do nothing, they achieve nothing. Or they grossly overreact, underreact, freeze, whatever it happens to be. So it is the human system that we are going to talk about tonight, the human factors. And that to me is like one of the root places that you have to start when you talk about weaponizing or preparing for any type of crisis, but especially the human crisis. So that was long-winded on my part, but I want you guys to jump in and just talk about the significance of the human system and why it's so important to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight and go into the details of this.
Yeah, I'll go first, and just there's kind of two things that hit me as you're introducing those concepts. And the first one is going back to like why does the human crisis hit people so differently? And the word that always jumps out at me is targeted. Right? Like it's targeted. You said that without using that word, you exactly explained that, but that's that feeling. It's like you said, the person makes a decision to seek you out and cause violence towards you specifically. Whereas like a natural disaster, a natural crisis, a mechanical crisis, it's not targeted. Do you know what I mean? If it's mechanical, it's often an accident. You know, something goes wrong. It's not supposed to happen. It just happens that you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. You end up in this mechanical crisis. Same with a natural crisis. A tornado is not coming after your house. You know, unfortunately, your house might be in the path, but it's random. It's not personal. It's not targeted. But it's that feeling of being targeted, I think, that really hits that emotional system so much harder. And that's what people just aren't always prepared for. And then the other thing that jumped out at me was, what was it? Shoot. It'll come back to me.
Yep. Well, why
jump
do
in,
you
Brad.
Yeah,
I'll think
Brad, why don't you jump in, and then if it pops in, Dustin will jump in.
You know, actually, one of the things that I want to touch on is kind of just to piggyback a little bit about where Dustin left off. And it's like when we talk about being hit on that emotional system, and we talk about the mechanical, the natural, and the human type of crises, is that, you know, everybody, even knowing they may not know what to do, if there's a car accident or if there's a tornado, for the example that we used, they're willing to jump out and help somebody in need, right? With the mechanical and the natural types of crises out there that we could find ourselves in. But when it comes to the human factor, a bystander is way less likely to help out somebody, even with the justification is like, well, I wouldn't know what to do. It's like, well, I don't know CPR and first aid, but if there's a car accident, even knowing I don't know what to do, I'm still going to try to render aid, right? So it's like, it hits us on such an emotional level that it doesn't even have to be targeted to us, that we as pedestrians and bystanders, that they very much so less likely to come and render aid when it is a human crisis.
Okay, let's Dustin, did it come back to you?
Yep. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Go for it.
All I was gonna say is again, when you look at those three different types of crisis, not so much in the moment, even though it can be quite similar, but more so in the planning or preparing stages of it, which you kind of alluded to. I think again, one of the biggest differences is in the natural crisis and mechanical crisis. So much of that prevention, planning, preparedness is in the physical realm, which again you described, but it's very much your physical system. It's like, what do I need to buy? what do I need to save up on? What do I need to store? Or what plan do I need? Where do we need to go? How do we get there? Who needs to be there? Who needs to know? It's all very physical stuff. You know what I mean? It's not so much the emotional, psychological part of it, at least not in the pre-planning. Changes a little bit in the moment, but whereas when it comes to like a human crisis, if you're not putting all your planning into the emotional, like you're going to be in one for sure. It doesn't matter how good your physical plan is. It's kind of like that saying, you know what, no plan survives contact. I think that one is radically apparent when it comes to human crisis, which I won't go into because I know that's what tonight's about, is just unpacking that. But.
Yeah. Okay. Great points, and I'm gonna dive deeper into what Brad said, but I'm just gonna address real quick Dustin's second point, especially about the idea that the prep is all happening on the physical front. Like, what can I buy? And there's a lot of reasons for this. Psychology of humans, right? Especially in today's day and age. There's something wrong with me. Where's my pill? Like, if I got something medically wrong with me, the doctor will give me a pill and I will be better. Like, write me a prescription, give me a protocol. Like, what fixes this and what fixes it now? Why? Because when my cell phone doesn't work, I just go buy another cell phone. When my car breaks down, I just take it in and say, fix this. Like, there's something. What's wrong with it? Oh, it's a belt. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. So either it's pay the money, fix it, or buy something to replace it. And so we're very conditioned to make life easier for ourselves now, and which it is, and it's great stuff, right? But yes, the physical preparation happens, but that's going to tie into understanding the human system in terms of how is it impacted. Because the human system in any crisis, natural, mechanical, or human, the physical part of it is never first. And that's a concept a lot of people are going to be like, what are you talking about? If I'm lying in bed at night and the tornado starts, the winds are blowing and my roof starts lifting off the foundation of my house, like starts pulling apart, it's physically fucking happened to me. The first thing that's being impacted is the physical system, right? It's the tornado hitting the house. It's the crunch of the metal as I get hit in a car accident. It's the chain breaks and the pipes fall and crush my foot. The physical system is the first thing that's impacted. And in violence, it's the punch, it's the knife, it's the stab, it's the grab, it's the whatever it is. And it's just not true. The physical system is never the first system impacted. So when you talk about prepping with your plan and all the tools and the food and all the shit that you could do, the physical system is never the thing that's hit first. So we need to cycle back to this, right? We're going to talk about that in a second. But I do not want to move forward without clarifying the opening statement of understanding the difference between the natural, mechanical, and the human, and why the human crisis is so much different. The human crisis, understand, right? Interpersonal human aggression is the number one universal human phobia. Meaning that if you took fill a room of 1,000 people, 10,000 people, all different backgrounds. I don't care what their upbringing was, different belief patterns, just made it as random as you possibly could. In that room, if you introduced venomous snakes, rabid dogs, heights, confined spaces, roughly 5% of that audience is going to have a phobic scale response to that. Try to put them in a confined space, they're going to have a phobic scale fucking fear to that. Okay, roughly 5%. Okay? If you had that audience of so heights, snakes, dogs, whatever it is, roughly 5%. If you have that random audience and one person takes a machete, and walks into that audience and starts decapitating and delimbing and stabbing and slashing and skinning people, 98% of people in that audience are going to have a phobic scale response to that. Interpersonal human aggression is different because it's targeted. And I think we all get that. So Dustin talked about this, but analogy, the owner of your company walks into your company and says, we do not have to lay people off, right? Everybody's job is safe. The business is doing great. However, today we're firing someone. We don't have to fire anybody, but we're firing somebody. Dustin, you're fucking fired. And not only are you fired because, well, nobody likes you, you're lazy, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. And I'm saying this in front of all of your coworkers, all of your peers. So I don't just take you to the side and let you go. I make sure in front of everybody I say, it's Dustin, I don't have to fire him, I'm firing him, here's why. And I begin to debase you. I begin to dehumanize you just with my words. How does that feel?
It'd probably be traumatic.
That's targeted. It's personal. And that's just with words, somebody going, yeah, I just don't care for you. I mean, people can say, words don't bother me, sticks and stones break bones, words never hurt me. You're full of shit, because social media, people get a comment or they get a text, they don't let people lose sleep over it, they can't eat. That's now what I'm driving to is interpersonal aggression. And here's the thing with help. There's a tornado. The second it's kind of safe, even when it's not safe to do it, sometimes the tornado's hitting your house, somebody will run into that house to try to pull people out of it. Whether they have skills or not, that's Brad's point, right? Whether they're skilled or not, they go, fuck it, I cannot stand here. I know there's kids in the house, or I'm running into that house, I'm running into that fire, I'm running into that tornado, I'm running over to the car accident. Now here's the thing. People will help. They will help. It's less likely, but they will help if somebody's being assaulted, like if somebody's being stabbed and beaten, they will help in as much as when that person's lying on the ground bleeding out, somebody will run over and try to stop the bleeding. Somebody will try to call a 911. They are people that will help, but not as much as the tornado and the fire or the car accident. But here's what they won't do. Most people won't go into the situation and try to help by stopping the violence. See, this is important. They won't put themselves in a position where they may have to take human life. See, this is the difference. And the reason I wanted to clarify this is because in military conflict, right, you have a firefight going on and some guys are pinned down and they're running out of ammo. There will be a guy who will grab a box of ammunition, run through a hail of gunfire, almost certain death. He'll run through that to bring them more ammunition. And when he gets there, he'll drop the ammunition and he'll run back to get more, risking his life, virtual suicide mission. And he'll do it as many times as he can until he's shot and killed or it's over. What he won't do is run that ammunition when he gets there, pick up a gun, aim it at the enemy, and independently make a decision to pull the trigger and shoot and kill that individual across from him. That's where the big resistance comes into play. Because not only do we have to recognize that interpersonal human aggression, right, the human crisis, is personal. Somebody is targeting you and debasing you, dehumanizing, denying your humanity. It's one of the hardest things for us as human beings to accept, to fathom how somebody could so hate us because we're the most social creatures on the planet. That's one half of that. The other half then is to be able to rationalize, to intellectually understand, regulate our emotions enough that we can make an independent decision to inflict injury or possible death in defense of our life or the life of an innocent person, but to make a decision to destroy another human being that is currently a threat to us. Does that track? That's such an important process. Now, obviously, humans can kill, right? And whether it's murder or self-defense is determined after, but man can do it. But what are the ingredients? What are the factors that allow people to do it? Because what we're talking about is the human system. And if you don't understand that, like that gentleman in Red Deer, right? His home was broken into multiple times. He goes away, comes back. Here's the guy, the fourth time this crack-headed psycho is asleep on his bed. He gets his shotgun, orders the guy to get down on the ground. The guy, when he tries to take the safety off the gun, the guy attacks him, starts beating him to death with the baseball bat. He finally gets the trigger down, the safety off. He shoots the guy and kills the guy. And we're like, hooray, the good guy finally won. Totally justified. 100% legal within his right, and yet he's emotionally, mentally destroyed. Why? Because the human system did not understand the factors. It had not rationalized and accepted what is going on inside the human body that would allow him to be at peace to take that action. So we get, again, what happens? Destruction. Not physical death, but destruction of mental and emotional. So I don't know if you guys want to jump in on that part of it, but I wanted to make sure that that part was clear, that somebody helping you in a violent situation might run in there and go, whoa, 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 leave him alone, stop, stop. They can yell from the sidelines all they want. But the help that you need in that moment is somebody to physically have the ability to intervene. Now, everybody should help to the level of their skill and capability. There are times when putting yourself into the physical mix is tactically not smart, right? Like, someone's drowning in a well, you don't just jump in after him if you don't know how to swim, right? There's other things you can do to help. But I needed to understand that there is oftentimes people that could make a physical difference, but yet there's a resistance and they choose not to do it because the fear, the human system is imploding. right? They have all the skill, they have the size, they have the strength, they have they have all this stuff, and yet the human system fails them and they freeze. They underreact or they overreact in the wrong way, and it doesn't help the situation. So I don't know if you guys want to hit on that a little bit, and then we'll bump on to how the system is impacted. But
one thing that that popped in my mind as you're talking, and we've talked a lot in the past about awareness and accepting the realities of violence and criminality and so forth. And I think that even the awareness that your body is going to go through physiological changes under combat stress, that you get hit on the emotional system, that people, if they don't think that that's going to happen, that they're not going to have these responses to violence, then it's like you're going to eat a piece of trauma pie. Because one of the things that I just kind of that I wanted to write down and take a note of is like your responses to violence are natural. And people don't think that those are natural responses to violence. They're like, oh, well, why did I feel like I felt scared? I felt this, whatever they felt. And then that alone, just something that they didn't have the awareness and acceptance that they're going to have this physiological change to violence in the face of violence. That it's like, oh, fuck, that means that I'm this or I'm that. And it's like, no, you got to accept that these happen to everybody. And you need to know and understand what they are so you don't have a piece of trauma pie when should you experience those things.
100%. Yeah, the number one thing, right, is if you don't act in accordance with your conscience, you're going to take a bigger piece of the pie, which is what you're talking about, obviously. And the thing was this: imagine somebody that's a good person, really good person, and sees themselves as a defender. Like I want to say it they have the core beliefs that they believe in standing up for not only their own personal rights, but for other people's personal rights. So they have this conviction of belief. And then all of a sudden, they're on scene experiencing an unfolding human crisis. And sometimes this is even harder. It's not directed towards them. It's directed to somebody else, some other innocent person. Matter of fact, I can think of a story, just some of the research I was doing lately. There was a story of a young Muslim girl in Vancouver. This happened in Vancouver. She gets on, I can't remember what they call their sky trains there, but they have I can't think of the name, but a sky tram.
I think that is it, isn't it?
Okay, sure, perfect. If it is, then I meant that, and if it isn't, then forgive me. But she gets on the SkyTram, and this is 8 o'clock, 8:30 at night, so it's really crowded. She gets on, she sits down, and this other gentleman, he stands up, walks straight up to her, and starts screaming obscenities at her. Just racial obscenities, gender obscenities. He grabs her head, he grabs her hijab, she's wearing a hijab, grabs her head, grabs her hijab, and starts trying to pull her face into his crotch. Like he is like, I want people to understand and paint the picture that not only was this verbal, imagine being racially debased in front of people, but also physically and sexually debased in front of people. And she's, she's 15-ish, 16, she's young. And out of all the people, all the men, all the people on this SkyTram, right? How many people help? Nobody. Nobody helps until finally one guy, I think he was 20 years old, and he was the furthest away from her. And he sees this going on, and he gets up and he runs up and he puts himself between the attacker and this girl. And he tells him to knock it the fuck off. And the guy kind of comes forward and he shoves him and he just pushes him and he pushes him back, and the guy's screaming whatever, but it was enough that the guy walked away, still agitated and screaming things, but walked away. And then they came to the next stop, and the guy got off at the next stop. The doors closed and they went on their way. And of course, this girl is traumatized. Everybody else in there, people were recording, but people did not help. And this one guy, again, when they were talking to him afterwards, and of course the reporters questioned him and stuff like that, there's a couple things. One is the guy played hockey. He was a hockey player. So what? He had some neuroassociation of confrontation. And he said, when I saw him grab her, he goes, I heard him yelling and my brain was trying to process. Even though I heard what he was saying, I didn't move at that point. When he grabbed her by the head and started to pull her head down, he goes, next thing I know, I was already there and stood in between them. And what was his neuro association? Probably like a hockey fight. Somebody touched his teammate, grabbed him, and he was like, his instinct to want to defend took over, and he jumped in and stood in there and was like ready to fight. But it's like, it's this process again where why were all these people watching? And you had really good people. And I'm sure afterwards, many men on there did not act in accordance with their conscience. And so now what happens? You take trauma because you are not the man that you tell people you are. You didn't match up to the blueprint of your own self-image. You did not act in accordance with how you see yourself or how you want to be in this world. And here's the thing. Why? Are you scared? Were you a pussy? You're just weak. You're all talk. You're a paper tag. You're this. No. Some people, maybe that's the fact, but most people, no, that's not what it is. What happened was almost what happened to that young hockey player. In the beginning, when he heard the racial slurs and the assault was verbal, his brain was disconnected, right? He was having that reaction. The human system was impacted. And this is a great, let's indicate, because Brad, you've mentioned it a couple times, but let's lay it out. The physical act is never first. Yet most people think the physical is the first thing in any crisis. It's the physical thing. That's how the crisis begins. It's not. The first system, the first human system that's impacted is the emotional system. Think about it. We're emotional creatures. We feel first and think second. There's no argument to that. As intellectually intelligent as we are with our logical brains, we do not think first and feel second. We feel first. So the emotional system is the first impacted system. So when this happened, when that attack happened and they heard the thing, and in other crises, when people, they feel something's wrong first. Their brain can't, his brain couldn't even dissect, couldn't even decode what was going on. It's like I heard him say these horrific things, but his brain couldn't decode it. Is this real? Is this a movie? Is this a joke? Is this whatever it is? But they felt it. Everybody on that train felt it. That's why people are so quick with their cell phones. Because they feel something and they pull that's the conditioned response now. When something's not right or something's about to happen, I got this feeling, they pull out their cell phones to capture it on video.
I think that almost works against us as a society. Like, it's such a small point, but like, they're almost detrimental because like, it's important to get it recorded. Like,
Sure.
Yes, you want someone to have it because hopefully then the perpetrator gets caught and all that stuff. But it almost is like an easy out in a way. Like, if there was a part of you that thought like, I got to do something, and maybe you jump in, but you're not sure, but you're like, well, I'll record it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
well,
that,
right there.
I didn't
Let me
do
ask you this, Dustin.
important, but like,
Let me ask you this. What you just said, they pull it out and they record it. What does that feed when it comes to the denial? What can they do now? Because they're in denial, but what did they do? I got my phone. I needed to what? What are they doing?
Yeah, they're kind of justifying, rationalizing
Yes.
what they did and that's good enough, right? It's
That's the power of your point. 100%. The denial is the rationalization, justification, minimization, excuse making, or flat out refuse to deny it. When everybody's in it, why didn't you do something? Oh, I'm totally the guy that would fucking do something. I would stand. Oh man, if it had gone any further, the only problem is that I was there recording it because I wanted to make sure that we had a copy for evidence for the police. So now we've rationalized away why I couldn't do it. Or you could justify it, I was this, or minimize it because of this, whatever. Oh, I was doing something. That guy was sitting over there doing fuck all. You weren't even recording it. Like, why weren't you know what I mean? Like, now we can compartmentalize and try to take a smaller piece of responsibility, take a smaller piece of trauma pie. Especially, now there's some people that their beliefs are like, I ain't no hero. I'm not jumping in that shit. I'm self-preservation guy. I was waiting for those train doors to open. I was getting the fuck out of there. I was hiding under the bench in case somebody started shooting. I was already on the ground playing dead. Like, and they're like, I'm fine with that. That's who I am. That's my self-image. Okay. Like, okay. So yeah, you're 100% right that they're using this and recording stuff feeds into the denial process. Okay. So
especially when there's multiple people around.
100%.
It's easier to do that. It's like, oh, well, somebody was, this, I couldn't get to him because there was a person in front of me. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. So I did this from here. So it just kind of compounds the effects of what exactly you're talking about.
And you're talking about shared accountability, shared responsibility, right? That's why like atrocities are far more likely to occur when
there's a crowd.
When there's large groups of people. The larger the group of people, the more likely an atrocity will occur. Isn't that strange for a lot of people? A rape, a sexual assault, a molesting, a mugging, a murder, far more likely to happen when there's a massive group of people. Why? Because it's far less likely that people will intervene. Why? Because everybody there just can take the denial and go, yeah, but I wasn't closer. You were closer than me. I was too far away. I didn't know the person. Oh, I didn't even know it was happening until it was almost over. Yet the people that are, the girl's being assaulted is literally hitting his leg, like lying on him. He goes, I didn't even know it was happening. Right? Because when there's all these people go, I was distracted by this. Like, if one person walks around a corner and sees violent assault happening, that one person is more likely to do something. And by whatever means, say something, do something, get a better description, call the police, go try to find help, do something. Why? Because all of that guilt and horror is theirs. That whole pie is there. Should they walk away, they're going to have to eat it all. They cannot share any of that blame. So again, and all of this is tied into understanding how the human system responds in a crisis. The emotional system is hit first, and that's powerful. Because let's just finish this. Why don't you guys break it down? It's the emotional system, and then what happens after the emotional system feels it? And I'm going to circle back in a second, but the emotional system feels it. What's the second system that's impacted?
Our intellectual system.
So the psychology, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotional system, that turns to thoughts. That's the psychology. And then finally, the final and last system that is then hit is, of course,
Physical.
the physical system. So let's just jump back to the beginning. In preparation for crisis, most people start with the physical system. Get my strategies, my tools, get all the stuff for the physical prep. What can I do? That's why everybody's so solution-based when it comes to self-defense. Show me the punch, show me the technique, show me the counter choke, show me the arm bar, show me the physical shit I need to beat the shit out of somebody. I mean, defend myself. Whatever, right? It's the physical. And then people will talk, look at this great knife, look at this great gun, look at this, I got this for my kid, I got that for my kid, I got all this tech, it's all the physical system. Yet that's the last system that's impacted. Important stuff. But in the hierarchy of it, you're not preparing the human system. So we got to come back to the emotional system. Now, when I say that we're emotional creatures and we feel stuff, right? Understand that, like, you see it, you feel it, or you hear it. So feeling, it's the intuition. You see it. Your sensory faculty sees the threat, the potential of a threat, or you hear it. Verbally saying something to you, you hear a sound, like middle of the night, you hear a sound, your ear perks up. Fuck, that somebody's in the house. Like, you hear it, see it, or feel it. The second that happens, your body's physiological survival system activates. That's the sympathetic nervous system, the SNS. That's your fight or flight response kicks in. And that's where Dustin or Brad, I can't remember which one, but we alluded to, you have to understand what that feels like when the survival physiology activates. And the survival physiology and the feeling that something's not right happens before you formulate a psychological thought. Remember, these things happen fast. Most people become aware of a thought first, but they're feeling it well before they think it. Even when you see something, the eyes perceive, you feel it. It's the emotional system. I don't care if you see it, feel it, or hear it. The emotional system's impacted first. Now, the second thing is those feelings, when it does then impact the psychological system, you have to understand that there is a filter that's built in your body, whether you've trained it or it's just there because of how you've lived your life or the experience you have, whether it's your unconscious programming, what software are you running? Most people are running software that they inherited, and it's unwanted software. It's right. It's just all the experiences and all the conditioning that's happened to them over life. But understand that, like, you have a filter, and it is your perceptions, your expectations, which formulate your beliefs. And this is just important to touch on really quick, because what are you going to focus on, and what's the meaning that you attach to it? What do you expect it to mean? And this is where a lot of people, again, if you go back to the SkyTrain, you feel the danger. Then you process that, and psychologically you go, well, the danger's not directed towards me. Whew, thank God. Right? Which is normal, because your survival system cares about you. Doesn't care about somebody else, cares about you first. So you might have that little bit of the, whew, it's not me. But then all of a sudden, what is your perception, what's your expectation, and what are your beliefs? Many people on that SkyTrain, I guarantee you, and this will make sense to most people. When they heard what he was saying to her, part of their perception was that, well, they must know each other. What did she do to get him so angry? Do you understand what I mean? Because most human beings have an expectation that you have to have done something wrong for somebody to respond that way to you. Does that make sense? Most people think like, I got murdered last night. Well, what happened? Like, did they approach you and you said the wrong thing and pissed them off? Like, this is where the whole concept of victim blaming comes in. And it happens with men as much as it happens with women, but people want a reason. They need a reason. The mind hates a void. They cannot stand the thought of like, it was random. Like, she did nothing other than be the nationality that she was born. She did nothing. But in their minds, when this is all happening fast, the feeling of terror, think about it. Do something. Go help her. Why might not you do that? Because denial kicks in and goes, well, maybe, do they know each other? I don't want to get involved if they know each other. It's not my place. Rationalizing away why you shouldn't get involved because they know something and I don't know the backstory. So I don't really know what's going on here. Then they hear what he's saying, they see what he's doing. Well, that's not right. But then it's like, well, maybe this, maybe that. Like your expectation. So people have an expectation. What does violence start over? What's your expectation? Right? You guys have come across a lot of people. Let me ask you that. What's your expectation of why violent criminal assaults start? Like if somebody threatened your life, the life of your family tomorrow when you're out living your life, what's your expectation as to what would have happened for that to kick off?
Virtually nothing.
Nothing I did.
Okay. Real quick answer. You guys are both like, well, I don't have an expectation of like, oh, I guess this would happen, this would happen. Do you think that's normal? Or do you think most people share that perceptual view?
Not a chance. That's trained.
I think that's why when something happens over nothing, right, which it often does, is why people are so fucking shocked. Because it's like, oh, like the situation you talked about, she was just sitting there. A girl got on a train and had this violent experience happen to her, right? This assault happened to her over nothing, you know? So people are fucking shocked because you're right. They think that it's got to be this big workup, this big event of why violence happens. And more often than not, it is over fucking nothing.
Well, think about this paradigm. Have you guys ever heard this? It takes two to fight. It takes two to argue, right? It takes two to fight. That's what people say all the time. But violence doesn't take two because it's not a fight. Violence takes one.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dustin.
No, man. You lost my train of thought again.
I intercepted you, knocked it right out of your head.
Like, why'd you do that?
Okay. Well, if it comes back in, just start talking and I'll shut up. What I was going to say on that train, when people got interviewed the train, you know how many people, if the police said, so can you tell me what happened? And people said, I don't know, I missed the start of it. Yet they didn't miss the start of it.
Oh, what I was going to say, I'm going to cut you off, is I think like if you were to ask people, like, and this goes back to like kind of what Brad was saying, or maybe it was you that were saying it, but just, and coming back to that targeted thing again. But if you were like, say you flip on the news and you hear a report that last night 5 people were murdered in a home in Northwest Edmonton, right? Right away, people are going to go like, what's happening? Like, what's going on? There's going to be fear. And then they follow it up with one of two things. It can either be, yeah, the victims were all known to police, and police believe it was gang related, and blah 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 blah. And most people watching that are gonna go, "Oh, thank God," because right away it's like, "Well, that's not me. I'm not in a gang. I don't do that.
Yep.
So I'm safe."
Yep.
But had that story been, the victims we don't believe there was any relation to anything. It appears that it was random, and the suspects are still at large. Like, what ending do most people want to hear? Not the latter, because right away it's like, well, now it could be me.
100%.
So it's sort of like, it's that whole denial thing, right? Like, we're going back to, people on the train, like, what had to start over something. Mm-hmm. Because if it starts over nothing, you're a potential victim.
100%.
And I think that's what's so scary to people. And that's kind of, circle my wagon here, that's the point I was trying to make, is that like, when things are random, if you admit it's random, it means you're susceptible to it. And that doesn't work for people, right? It doesn't fit into their pattern of denial. So
Yep. No, 100%. And it, just so we can keep in the context of the human system, you know, like you said, if people felt that that was random, then that means that if it happened that night, it could happen the next night. And that means that it could happen to you. So it's not just like in that moment of people like, oh my God, like, so they're rationalizing, justifying for that moment. No, they're rationalizing, justifying for future moments, right? And so when the human system, when we feel these threats, and those feelings then get into that filter, what are your, this is why this is, because people right away be like, okay, well, then how do you prepare the human system? Most people watching this go, I have a decent idea of how to prepare the physical actions, because I can learn to punch, learn to kick, learn to ground fight, learn to use a knife. I can buy generators and all that shit. I can get hunting skills and how to start a fire, whatever crisis we're talking about. But they say, okay, well then how do, like, if I'm going to have this emotional feel, I'm going to feel it all first. I'm just going to get hit. Well, how do I control that? Well, because if you look at the chain I just showed you, perceptions, expectations form the beliefs. How you change the feeling is by building out and changing your perception and your expectations, and that changes your beliefs. That is why we do so much work on belief. We weaponize the belief system. We go in and we challenge conflicting beliefs that people have, and they've had them for their whole lives, like thou shalt not kill. That's a conflicting belief. You go, I believe in self-defense. Well, do you believe in your legal and moral right to kill, to take human life? And a lot of people are like, no, I don't. Well, we have a conflicting belief. Or you say, yeah, I do, but yet you've been raised your entire life with thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not kill. Use your words, don't hit, only animals hit. All of that paradigm conditioned belief has been instilled in you. But if you don't know how to go in and uncover that belief, you can intellectually say, I believe in my right to life, liberty, freedom, and security, and I believe that if under compulsion and when legal and moral, I will take human life. Say, well, if you haven't rectified, if you haven't dealt with that paradigm that you were given about thou shalt not kill and believing that that's morally wrong and that you'll go to hell or whatever your belief system happens to be, there's a lot of powerful paradigms and legs built under that table. And that's just one example because it's an easy example to see. But people have expectation and belief about why they would ever be targeted. I know so many people that have said, I have no fear of the shit that you train for because I know how to mind my own fucking business. I don't get caught up in other people's shit. I'm not a fucking drug dealer, so I don't get caught up in people's shit. The people like say, I know how to fucking talk. I'm good with my, I can talk my way out of fucking anything. Do you understand that these are beliefs that they have formulated? What happens when you got a guy that goes, I'm not worried about any of this shit because I mind my own fucking business. I go to work, I keep my fucking head down. I don't say shit to nobody. Somebody wants to call me a fucking bastard and cocksucker. I don't give a shit. I mind my own fucking business. That's a belief he has that'll keep him safe, that belief. What happens when some guy's saying something, he goes, I just mind my own fucking business, and that guy stabs him in the fucking shoulder, stabs him in the neck, goes to grab him or goes to grab his kid. And all of a sudden it's like, I just mind my own fucking business. My expectation and my belief was that would keep me safe. So even if he successfully defends himself and defends his child, and he's like, yeah, you fucking right, you don't touch me, you don't touch my kid. There is conflict inside of that, especially if he seriously injures or takes the life of his attacker. You cannot help but have a different level of trauma after it because you've gone in opposition, you've acted not in accordance with your conscience. What creates the conscience in people? What is your conscience? It's your beliefs and your values. That's your conscience. Most people are walking around unweaponized with unweaponized beliefs and values. Meaning what? They inherited them from teachers and coaches and parents and the ecosystem that they grew up in and the culture and the perceptions of the times. Somebody that grew up in the 60s and 70s has different cultural perceptions and different paradigms than somebody that grew up in the 90s. And yet most people have never done the work. They've never had a process where they had to go through it and say, listen, we need to really figure out what your values and beliefs are. And now we're talking in terms of crisis, especially the human crisis, because it's fucking personal. There's no way around it. You're never going to have another human being lay hand on you in an attempt to injure or kill you and not take it personally. Not unless you've done a ton of work on your beliefs. Not unless you've weaponized your perceptual system, like the human system. So again, here we are on a podcast about violence, and we're not talking about punches, kicks, arm bars, and the greatest martial art or fighting system in the world. We're talking about the impact on the human system, the person that is going to be inside of the crisis, right? So I don't know. Do you guys have anything you want to throw in off that?
Just makes me think of one word came in just as backstory. Because everybody wants backstory. They want to justify all sorts of actions from whatever situation it is. And, it's like we've always said, it's like, well, the backstory doesn't fucking matter. If you're faced with violence, why that violence is there and what the story is, it has no bearing to your defense plan, right? It's just what's in front of you. But everybody wants to be like, well, how did we get here? Again, tying it into violence happening over nothing, right?
100%. 100%. So if we've got, just for clarity, emotional system gets hit, engages the survival physiology, that feeling turns into the thought. That's where you have this filter system, perception, expectation, and belief. That's where the work has to be done. Change the focus, change the meaning of things, change the filter, weaponize your filters, right? And then of course, the third system impacted is the physical. What you feel and what you think and the beliefs that are connected to that determine every action that you take in your life. That's why people intellectually go, I know I'm going to quit smoking. I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get in the best shape of my life. I'm going to earn more money. I'm going to improve my marriage. I'm going to be a better father. And they intellectually understand it all, and all the information is there for how to excel at any one of those things that I listed, yet they don't do it. Why don't you do it? Because the feeling that you have, you're not emotionally invested. Matter of fact, the feelings that you have run counter to what you're saying you want, what you intellectually know will serve you at the highest level, your emotional system, and then the psychology, the thoughts you think, the true thoughts that you think, your perception, your beliefs, all of those things, your expectations are all running counter to what you say you want. And so imagine that in a life and death situation. Like we all know, there's not one of us sitting here that can't relate to what I just said, because we all are trying to improve things that we struggle against. We all have paradigms and limiting beliefs and things that we go, areas of our life where we go, fuck, why can't I change this? We've all have started the proverbial diet, not saying it has to be connected to health, but that type of thing where you go, I'm changing this. And then next, 30 days later, 3 months later, a year later, we're back in the beginning of the cycle going, fuck. Why do I have to keep repeating this lesson? Why do I have to keep trying to climb this mountain? So imagine that in violence now, when the interpersonal human aggression's in front of you and you're having a phobic scale response because the perceptions, the expectations, the beliefs are not weaponized. And your human system is starting to implode on you. You can't even get to the physical system. It's like, I don't know. It's not there, right? Because the human system has failed you. And I think Peter's thrown up a Mike Tyson quote. Everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. That's 100% correct. Take that to the next level when someone is trying to end your life. How can you survive without some sort of training? It's not possible. It is this thing where you're 100% correct on everything you just said. And the one thing that'll change things is predisposition. People having, there are people that have, let's put it this way. There's people that have no training that have defended themselves successfully against violence, but here's the thing, they have had training. They just haven't had training, formalized instruction. What they had was a fucking upbringing. What they had was life experiences. They had experiences that formulated their perception of the world, their worth and value when it comes to their life. Those perceptions and those experiences created an expectation. There are people out there that have a full expectation that there are people in this world that'll fucking hurt you if you give them even half a chance, and they have created beliefs. And they have beliefs that if somebody comes at me, I will fucking come at them twice as hard. These people have had training, but they've had life training. And so their filter has been developed. What I'm speaking to is those people are not the norm, because most people, especially if we look at first world countries, we don't grow up fighting. Like, I didn't have to grow up fighting for food. I didn't have to roam the streets begging or worrying about somebody robbing me or other kids taking from me. I didn't have to worry about my life. I didn't wake up. I didn't go to bed at night and I didn't wake up in the morning in fear of my life. A lot of people grow up in first world countries, but they grow up in really hard fucking conditions. And so their filter gets developed. What I want people to understand is you can be this great person who's been blessed to have a great life, and you're continuing to live this blessed, great life. But you're like, geez, what would happen if I found myself in a crisis? Well, the human system, have you been in crisis? I mean, let's go. Where's Tornado Alley? Texas, right? Isn't it through there somewhere? Again, I'm either sounding real smart or super ignorant. But Tornado Alley, right? I've been through a tornado. That tornado passed not that far from our house. We were young enough that my friend and I tried to chase the tornado. We thought it was cool. Hail size. One of my best friends, his dad was almost killed. Multiple people in his dad's place of work lost their lives that day. He was hospitalized, disfigured from it. I mean, I remember the trauma and that experience. But here's the thing. If another tornado hits, I'm no better prepared than I was when that first tornado hit, because I haven't experienced it. It was not enough to change my perception, to change my expectations and formulate belief patterns. It wasn't enough. I didn't get the loss of life. It didn't weigh enough on me because I was this young kid who felt I was invincible, so it didn't penetrate and formulate my beliefs. My point with the Tornado Alley is there's lots of people there that have been through multiple tornadoes. Seems insane to me. The house got ripped down, build it again. 2 years later, gets ripped down again, built. Like, what the fuck are you living there for? Move. But you guarantee that those people understand how to handle a natural crisis with no fucking training. Oh, wait, they did have training. They had fucking tornadoes ripped through every 2 or 3 years or 3 times in a summer. And if their house didn't get ripped down, you get what I mean? They have experience. They have training. They just had, what does my dad always call it? You had, I grew up in the School of Hard Knocks. That was my teacher, right? School of Hard Knocks, life teaches you. You know what I mean? You make a mistake, life hits harder than any sparring partner you're ever going to have. Life hits harder than any violent criminal ever can. So there are people that have this. So I want you to understand. I didn't have to go through the School of Hard Knocks in the virtual way of life teaching me how to weaponize my human system. I was lucky enough to meet people that understood that had a lot of those experiences, that developed the process so they could educate other people. Specifically preparing young men for war. And teaching them how to be like special forces. Teaching them how to weaponize the human system in addition to teaching them all the physical skills. But the human system has to be part of this. Matter of fact, it's the foundational stuff. So this is the human factors that I wanted to talk about tonight and try to hit it from different angles and let people understand that one of the greatest gifts you can ever possess when it comes to defending yourself and your family and being prepared for violent criminal assault is to make sure that you have access to training that will weaponize the human system from perception to expectation to belief, which in turn regulates your emotional responses and reactions to things, controls and dials in the psychology of thoughts, and ultimately allows you to take the actions that you not only want to take, but need to take to actually thrive in those situations, not just survive. And here's the most important part. It is also your greatest level of protection from trauma after the event, right? Because the human system itself is prepared for that crisis. And so at the end of the day, your slice of trauma pie, if you have to take a life, no matter how legal, no matter how morally righteous it is, no matter how justified and vindicated you are, you're going to take a piece of pie, of trauma pie, for ending a life. Like that's just what we know from those that have been through this experience. Matter of fact, the gentleman I talked about from Red Deer that ended up having to shoot his attacker and who is suffering from the trauma, the psychological mental trauma, and it is now and will continue to be a toxic, corrosive effect on his life and his connections and relationships from now to the day he dies. His statement after is all telling. He said, until you point that weapon and pull the trigger, until you take a human life, and until you do that, you have no idea. Now, I didn't say that with the tone he said it. But if you hear him utter those words, the pain and the destruction is as real as seeing, as if he'd lost 2 of his limbs in that altercation. It's undeniable. And why? He physically did what he needed to survive, but the human system was impacted, damaged, and traumatized in a way that is still with him and will be probably. He'll work probably the rest of his days to try to find a rationalization and acceptance and leave some of that trauma behind. It's possible. But, you know, if he is motivated to do the work and has access to the right type of counseling and stuff, PTSD is not a life sentence. It's something everybody can have, but it's not something that you have to die with. You can manage it. You can move through it, provided that you're motivated to do that, because it's also going to be extremely debilitating, obviously, right? So, I don't know, guys, anything off that kind of overview?
Not really for me. I think, again, is just the importance of, of being real and having the awareness that this is part of what you are going to deal with. That's part of the experience of violence. And it's just, we have to be prepared for it. Just like we're going to go get generators and gasoline and food, it's like, let's take stock, let's take inventory, and let's build our resources for the emotional system and for the human factors.
Yeah. I'll say this, and then Dustin, if you have something, just interrupt, or when I'm done, you go. But one of the things that, and I don't know if this is unique to me, but because I had done the martial arts and I was doing the combative sport prior to weaponizing, but prior to my experience with violence, right? I was doing those, I was from those two worlds doing those things, but my sole goal was wanting to be able to defend myself. So the problem that I had was wanting to know how to defend my life. But I didn't understand that there was a difference, right? I didn't understand that those martial arts and the combative sports is not related. It's not the same language as violence. What I'm getting at is that after my violent assault, the trauma, I call it my pain pit, right? But the pain cycle that I was in, like the physical injuries took a year, all that stuff, but they're easy to get over. But the mental and the emotional and the psychological trauma was so significant to me, like my whole self-image and stuff. But now, being where I'm at, if I can reflect back, I understand that, like, of course I had PTSD. Of course I then was lashing out in anger and trying to cope through alcohol and different, completely self-destructive behaviors, which of course ripple out and affect everybody else around you. But because the human system was so toxically, impacted in that moment. But what I got is when I found my mentors, when I found somebody that I believed actually had a solution, like understood me, the thing that got me was not, they showed me like this it wasn't them showing me this new physical system. In the first 30 minutes of talking to this person, full of nothing but skepticism, like this is just going to be more martial arts and more bullshit and they don't understand and all this type of stuff, and being trapped in this pain cycle, was they addressed the human system. And I got a glimpse of what we're talking about, and I became obsessed with wanting to repair the human system, because I needed to repair it. I didn't just need to weaponize it, I needed to repair it. And any time that they talked about the emotions and the perceptions, the expectations and beliefs, because most people have heard of what they call one trial learning. Tell your kid, don't touch the stove, it's hot. Don't touch the stove, it's hot. You'll get burned, it hurts like hell. Don't touch the stove. Stove's on, kids like, that's a pretty bright red. They touch it, they pull their hand away. And what happens in that moment? Their perception of the stove in heat, their expectation of what's going to happen if they touch that, and their belief is formed instantaneously. Well, what happens when 3 and then mutating into 8 guys grab you, bottle you, pin you down, smash bottles and try to murder you? What happens when somebody tries to murder you? Well, you didn't touch the stove touched you. And so guess what happened? My perceptions, my expectations, and my beliefs, all brand new beliefs, were all formed in that moment. And they were all fucking negative. They all kept me in a duress loop. That's why after that, all of a sudden, somebody would just talk loud in a room and you go into full fucking catastrophic condition black. You're having panic attacks. Your SNS is out of control. You're fucking sweating profusely. You're experiencing tunnel vision. You feel like you're going to fucking pass out. All this shit is happening because a perception expectation and a belief pattern was formed that you're in trouble. You're going to die. You can't, like all this shit. You can see where I'm going with this, right? That shit was all real. That's the pain you're trapped in. The physical injuries are healing. And then guess what you do? You put a mask over top of it. You hide it. How do you hide it? Drink more. Fucking act tough, smash shit, talk loud, do all this shit, like just false shit to hide behind. And so for me, like the second I started understanding and they started training me how to fix and weaponize the human system, that's where my healing started. And I say that because there's potentially somebody watching this right now that either one of two things. Either you've experienced what I've experienced and you're caught in a pain cycle, and as much as you go, I want to defend myself, every time you try to find a solution, every time you go try and take a martial art, every time you say, I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've been doing it for 2 years, I'm doing Krav Maga, I'm doing all these things, yet, yeah, I'm getting some stuff out of it, but something's missing. I feel like there's a fakeness to that. It might not be the art. It's because the human system has been damaged. It's because they're not addressing that part of it. And you cannot implement a system without the right software. And until you have that piece of the puzzle, until that's addressed, it won't change. You will never outrun the feelings of fear, inadequacy, self-loathing, all that, like self-doubt, uncertainty will always be there. And there's other people that have not experienced that, but can connect right away and go, I don't ever want that. I don't ever want to feel that level. It's not about getting punched. No one wants to get punched in the face, but it's not about getting punched in the face. It's not about even getting stabbed or shot. It's about if your human system fails you, if that collapses in terror, fear, uncertainty, self-doubt, if that collapses, now you've not acted in accordance with who you believe yourself to be, that'll destroy you. Does that make sense? I hope that analogy made sense. To me, the quickest example I can think of, the quickest real-world story I can think of, is an individual that was always armed. He's from the States. He has his concealed carry permit, well-trained, like high level of training. And one day, people in his parish, very religious, people in his parish found out that he had his concealed carry on him during Mass. So on Sunday when you come to church, and this is 15 years ago. This is before there's been in recent news a lot of shootings in churches, but this is pre that. And they pressured him. He stopped carrying his firearm with him to church. And one day what happens? He's at church and a guy bursts in and starts shooting his fellow worshipers, his fellow parishioners. And he starts shooting them, and he does not have his gun. He is not able to stop the spy, so lives are lost. Now, in this moment, what happened to him? Was it the fact that he didn't have the gun and couldn't pull the trigger to end him? Or do we have to back up from that and say all of a sudden what happened? His perception, his expectation, his beliefs all told him one thing. And in the moment, he betrayed his beliefs. He didn't act in accordance with his own conscience because he wanted to appease the conscience of others. The sheep, the people that he knew needed protection, that he had said, I'm the guy that protects. When that wolf comes, I'm the motherfucker that stands up. You looking for a safe place? Get behind me. This is me. This is what I do. And he didn't have that. So what do you think happens to him after that? Where do you think his PTSD comes from? If he had his gun and he took his gun out and he ran towards the other guy with the gun and he engaged him, and parishioners were shot, his fellow peers, his friends, his family were shot and killed, but he was actively engaging, actively living his beliefs, his expectations. He was in alignment with that. And finally, either he dies or he takes the guy out. Whatever the conclusion, is he at peace or does he have the same self-loathing? Does he suffer the same, does he take the same piece of trauma pie? Are those situations similar or are they completely different? I think they're completely fucking different.
Yeah, because he's in the latter. He's acting in accordance with the conscious.
He's doing the best.
And like he had a level of responsibility, and then that responsibility he still had after the fact, but was not able to meet the expectations of that responsibility. And that responsibility was he set that upon himself. Nobody set that on him, but he was not able to hold up his part of that responsibility, and therefore,
Yeah. When you say the word responsibility, you said it right after, so you nailed it. You said responsibility is expectations. Like responsibilities that we own, that we accept, are expectations. Mm-hmm. If I put a responsibility, Brad, you came in and I handed you a gun and I handed you a vest that said security and said stand here and say, listen, it's not a matter of if, it's when. Someone's going to come through the door shooting. You know what I mean? But I hired you. You're collecting a paycheck. You're security. Hold your gun. A guy comes through the door. Defend everybody. But that's not your belief systems. You can take that job and you can collect the paycheck. And you'll do that if you believe the odds of that happening are next to none. Or you go, even if it does happen, fuck that shit. I'm running out the back. Screw these people. They don't pay me enough to actually give a fuck. You get what I mean? Like, we're talking about what is your true expectations? What are your true beliefs? And that's why we have to formulate these things. But that is the human system. That story I shared, that is the human system in action. To be able to allow us to live up to what are our perceptions? How are we viewing things? What is the meaning we're attaching to things? What are our expectations and what are those beliefs? This is probably one of the most powerful podcasts that we've done. And it's such an interesting, like I said, for me, I became obsessed. And I'm still to this day am more obsessed with this aspect of it, training and preparing people and sharing this and continuing to build my own beliefs, because beliefs and values change as we grow older. Beliefs and values have to change with how the world is changing. The times change, and this is not new. As long as humans have been on this planet, times have changed. And there's been, we all understand like seasons, right? There are times when the world is in a more volatile place. There are times when more rudimentary primal violence and chaos and anarchy is at a higher potential. We're looking at it, just look at the world, look at the political climate of the world right now with Russia and the Ukraine and the position. How close are we right now to potentially a third world war? That is something that is a reality. And what's the impact of all that? So yeah, we're talking global and politics, but you bring it back. There's times when we are safer as a people. There are times when, it's cyclical. So for me, more than ever right now, I've often said, like, we as individuals face, I believe, the most significant war that we have faced at any other point in time in my human history. Is happening right now. And me, my wife, my kids, my family, communities are desperately needing people that can rise regardless of what happens. Whether that's violence, natural, mechanical, whatever life throws at us, we need people that have weaponized the human system, have inoculated the human system, have bulletproofed the human system. And then, the physical strategies, tactics, and tools, yes, they're important, but what's the foundation it's built on? I don't know. Anything, and Dustin, you want to throw anything on that?
Just one last thing is hopefully we did a good job of, helping people understand just human factors and how the emotional system gets hit first. But so I think I would just challenge people, when you go to work tomorrow or whatever your day entails, it's just make a point of being aware of how you do not respond, but just what happens to you as things happen to you.
Yeah.
So you go to work tomorrow and something happens. It could be positive, could be negative. It doesn't matter, but just be open to paying attention. So something happens with a client, with a boss, with a coworker, just be aware or astute to the fact that you did feel it first.
Driving.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, sure, any of it, but just start to either in the moment or right after something happens, think back and be yeah, I felt this, and then right away I thought that, and then I did this. Do you know what I mean? Exactly what you talked about. You feel it, you think it, you act, you get a result, you develop a perception, a belief, and it just cycles around and around and around. It's if you didn't quite get it from us tonight, then it's just start to look at how you experience life.
Yep.
And I think you'll start to realize control follows awareness.
Yep. And
you'll see it firsthand, and it makes it that much easier then to drive forward.
Yeah. Well said. 100% agreement on that. Brad, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to pop in?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm good. Yeah.
Well, what I would say is this then, that being in the moment of this conversation right now, we're already just over an hour in this. There's so much more to this, but there is a part of it that we've been talking about that I actually think there's two things. One is that please watch, because in the next few weeks, we will take an episode. We'll take the time to go deeper into the survival physiology, the sympathetic nervous system, and break down so that people have a better understanding of what they're experiencing on that level, because that'll help tie into being able to weaponize the human system. The second part is there is a lot of really great work for understanding the duress path, understanding what happens when you have, like, how do I change my beliefs? What are my perceptions and expectations? And how these things might be wired to put us into a duress path, into a negative flow, into limiting patterns. And this will apply in any aspect of your life. And as a parent even, you need to understand how this system works, because this is how you change the game for your kids. This is how we have kids that are suffering with just PTSD and anxiety and stress. Their human system is being kicked into a constant duress path. There's triggers. It's like closing a circuit board. How should I feel about this? Duress, stress, anxiety, worry. And you can, if once you understand how that circuit is connected and what the breakers are in that circuit, we can begin to flip the switch and we can create what we call a flow path. We can get out of stress and constant anxiety and fear and all of that stuff. And it's just a phenomenal thing. So I think in the next few weeks, we're going to hit those two things. We'll do them on separate podcasts, but those are really, really critical to this conversation. If in a future point you are finding this, you're listening to this conversation tonight on human factors, look for the things that look for the podcast on the duress path, look for the podcast on the SNS, the physiology, the survival physiology, and follow up with those two podcasts after you've heard this. So depending on when you're hearing this and where we're at in terms of our event horizon, in terms of this world of podcasting, that's just some information I want to throw out there. So other than that, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Powerful conversation. Brad, Dustin, obviously, as always, you guys, thank you so much for your input, your insights, sharing with everybody. It is deeply appreciated and very valuable. And again, I will leave everybody after the end of this. I'm going to throw up 3 to 4 ways that I can help you guys weaponize your life for free, absolutely for free. Make sure you check those out. Please comment, like, share this with anybody that you think will benefit from this. Our whole mission in life is to reach more really good moral people that know that they must take responsibility for their safety, confidence, and certainty of that of their families, and stand up against the evil in this world. So thank you guys so much. And we will chat again soon. So I'll close off here. Stay safe, stay weaponized, chat soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. And listen, if you found this content valuable, here's 3 different ways that I can help you weaponize for free. First, grab a free copy of my ebook, The Education of a Weaponized Man. To get your free copy today, head to ebook.awakentheprotectar.ca. Number 2, you can take a free workshop where you will discover the 10 insights violent criminals don't want you to know. To take this workshop, head to workshop.awakentheprotectar.ca. The third way is to head to my website and check out all of my Freeline programs that cover everything from mindset to strategies. To check us out, go to awakentheprotectar.ca. And finally, leave a 5-star review so that we can reach more good people like you who are ready to weaponize and rise regardless.